It was past midnight when the first tremor rattled my farmhouse windows. At first I thought it was a storm rolling in, but when I stepped outside, the night sky lit up like a prison yard, blinding floodlights, roaring engines, and the unmistakable clang of steel against steel. Right there in the middle of my cornfields, cranes were hoisting massive pillars into the ground. My cows scattered in panic, fences splintered like matchsticks. And standing on a makeshift platform, megaphone in hand, was none other than Arya Moore, the self-appointed queen of our HOA. She shouted like she was leading a parade. "This is progress. This is the future of our community." I couldn't believe my eyes. They weren't just trespassing. They were building an elevated railway right through my farm. No vote, no permission, no warning. That night, under the harsh glare of construction lights, I realized something. This wasn't about progress. It was about power. And if Arya Moore thought I'd roll over and let her steal my land, she was in for the fight of her life. Before I dive into how this war ended, with me walking away $5 million, Richard, drop a comment with your location and local time. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story only gets wilder from here. By sunrise, the floodlights were gone, the engines quiet, and the field looked like a battlefield after the soldiers marched off. My corn lay in ragged stripes, wheel tracks tattooed the soil, and 5 raw holes yawned like open mouths where they'd started to sink foundations. The only proof it hadn't been a fever dream was the stack of rebar and the orange stakes marching across my property like a line of little flags claiming a new country. I walked that broken ground with a coffee in one hand and my phone in the other, filming everything. I narrated like a TV host, because if I didn't keep talking, I might start shouting. "Here you go, folks," I said to no one. Today's forecast scattered concrete with a 100% chance of lawsuits. My voice wobbled on the last word. This was my family's land. Anderson's soil. My father had taught me to read the weather by how the barn swallows skimmed the pond. My grandfather had measured time by the height of the corn on the 4th of July. You don't just roll an elevated railway through that and call it progress with a straight face. I stepped over a broken fence post and found my oldest cow, Daisy, standing guard by the pasture gate like a worried grandmother. "It's okay, girl," I said, scratching her ear. "They brought a circus to town and forgot to ask if we wanted tickets." I called the sheriff. He showed up in a dust-coated SUV hat, tilted back eyes, heavy with, "I've seen this movie size." "Morning, Mark," he said. "Got some calls last night." "I bet you did. They were building a bridge to nowhere in my field." He walked the perimeter, poked a few holes with his boot, and scribbled in a small notebook. "They showed me something from the HOA, some kind of community improvement resolution. Your HOA's been busy." "My HOA president is named Arya Moore," I said. "She's busy the way termites are busy." He tried not to smile, failed, then cleared his throat. "I can file a report. This looks off. But I can't shut a site down without a court order or some clear-cut criminal issue. You talk to the county. I'll start with the HOA. I want to hear her say it to my face." He gave me the card of the county planning office, and a look that meant he'd seen men take on machines and lose. "Document everything," he said. "And Mark, don't go alone." I didn't go alone. I brought my camera, 3 printed copies of the HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions. They jammed in our mailboxes the year I moved in, and the kind of fury that makes coffee unnecessary. The HOA office sits in a beige building that looks like a dentist tried to be a courthouse. The lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and quiet threats. Behind the counter, a receptionist smiled in that way. People smile when they've been told they're the first line of defense. "I need to speak with Miss Moore," I said. "Do you have an appointment?" "I have 5 holes in my cornfield. Does that count?" Something in my tone worked. 10 minutes later, the glass door opened, and Arya Moore entered like she owned the zip code. Pink blazer, pearls, hair, so controlled it could have passed an inspection. Her eyes did that quick top-to-bottom inventory thing. "Mr. Anderson," she said, "you look unrested. Your construction crew tucked me in with a pile driver." She led me into a conference room with a watercolor painting of a lake that looked too calm to be any lake within 50 miles of her. Saturday. She folded her hands. I kept mine open on the table because men who make fists in HOA meetings tend to lose. "This is a misunderstanding," Arya said, in the tone of someone who never misunderstands anything. "The board has approved an elevated transit initiative to alleviate congestion, reduce noise." "Noise," I said. "You installed a skyscraper's leg in my alfalfa." She slid a folder across the table. Inside, a glossy brochure with a friendly font, a cheerfully named Skyline connector, and a rendering of kids flying kites under a shadowless track. "This will increase property values," she said. "This will modernize our community." "You skipped a step," I said. The one where you get permission from the county, and me. She tilted her head sympathy, auditioning for her face. Easements, Mr. Anderson. The HOA negotiated a community easement with a private partner. The right-of-way maps are very clear. I've seen clearer maps on napkins. I slid out my CC and Rs and tapped the section on maintenance of common areas. Nowhere does this say you can carve a viaduct through private property. Her smile sharpened. You're quoting Section 4. Read Section 9, extraordinary improvements for the benefit of the collective. We have legal counsel. So do tyrants, I said. Briefcases don't make bad ideas legal. For the first time, a hairline crack showed in her composure. Mr. Anderson, the board understands change can be anxiety-provoking for certain homeowners. We're offering a goodwill stipend for those affected. We'd be happy to talk numbers. Is there a number that unpours concrete out of a hole, I asked? Because what I want is my field back. We'll take your concerns under advisement, she said, which is HOA for, we'll file them in a drawer that doesn't exist. When I left, a pair of board members were arriving golf shirts, approving nods, the kind of men who say, let's circle back like it's a blessing. In the parking lot, I ran into my neighbor Mrs. Delgado, who chaired the garden committee until Aria decided flowers clashed with her vision. Her lips were tight. They told me the railway would run behind my house, she whispered. I thought they meant behind, not through. They'll keep moving the word behind until it wraps around the whole town, I said. Back at the farm, I started making calls. County planning put me on hold with a loop of cheerful banjo that made me want to fight a jukebox. The state transportation office confused. No approved rail expansion permits filed under our subdivision, and a friend who works as a civil engineer who said elevated structures require environmental impact statements and geotech reports. If they're not on file, someone's lying. Someone was, and I had a short list. That afternoon, I found an orange envelope taped to my mailbox, notice of violation. According to the HOA, my perimeter fence was non-compliant due to unauthorized modifications. The unauthorized modification was the part where their forklift had driven through it. I laughed the kind of laugh that tastes like coins. Aria was drawing the battle map in fines. I built my own. I created a folder on my desktop called Skyline Lies and filled it with time-stamped videos, still photos, receipts for damaged feed vet bills for a calf that cut its leg on twisted wire. I wrote down everything Aria had said, word for practiced word. If she thought she owned the law, I would make her speak into it. That night, the subdivision Facebook group lit up. Someone posted a sunrise picture of the rebar stack in my field with the caption, "So excited." Finally, some modern transportation, I typed a reply, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Instead, I uploaded a 60-second clip from my footage, the floodlights, the roar, Aria's voice on the megaphone. I didn't add commentary. I didn't need to. The sound of steel speaking for itself is a powerful narrator. Comments poured in. A man with a username that sounded like a boat brand wrote, "We need this. Property values up." Mrs. Delgado wrote, "At what cost?" A mom posted a picture of her toddler covering his ears with the caption, "Nap time says otherwise." Then the post vanished. Deleted by admin, off topic, divided by divisive. The admin was Aria's vice president. Fine. If they owned the digital town square, I'd take it outside. I sent the clip to a local reporter I knew from a fundraiser years ago. She replied with a single line, "On it. Can you talk tomorrow?" That should have felt like relief. It didn't. Around 10 p.m., a pickup I didn't recognize idled at the end of my driveway. Headlights off. Engine humming. I stood in the dark by the porch, phone in my pocket, thumb hovering over the camera app. After a minute, the truck crept away slow, as a thought it didn't want to finish. The next morning, white survey flags had multiplied along my fence line like mushrooms after rain. There were spray-painted marks on the gravel numbers coded in neon, like a secret language written by a highlighter. A new sign staked near the road read "Temporary work access, authorized vehicles only." I pulled it up and set it in my barn. If they wanted it back, they could ask me in a tone that didn't include the word "only." By noon, I had an email from the HOA threatening additional fines for removal of official signage. I replied with a photo of the official signage leaning against the hole their crew had excavated. "Please advise where to return," I wrote. "Your office or back into the earth." At 3, the county planning office called me back. A man named Whitaker sounded flustered. "Mr. Anderson, we're reviewing your complaint. To be clear, there is no county permit for an elevated rail structure in your subdivision. The HOA submitted an amenity enhancement concept for a greenway and noise wall last year. Nothing about rail." "Then what are they building?" I asked. Something they shouldn't be, he said, and coughed like he'd said it louder than he meant to. Document everything. We may need your material. I've got a documentary, I said. That evening I printed the email and slid it into a binder labeled Exhibits because I'm the kind of man who sharpens a pencil by writing with it. I wasn't naive. I knew Arya had lawyers who made more in an hour than I did in a week. I knew she sat on boards and at tables where the coffee arrived before the truth. But I also knew this concrete hardens, and so does resolve. If they thought they could pour one faster than the other, they hadn't met an Anderson in court. As the sun sank behind the tree line, I walked the property one more time. The holes looked deeper in the amber light, like something ancient trying to climb out. Crickets tuned up. Somewhere a truck door slammed. Down the road, laughter drifted from a backyard where someone grilled on a Tuesday because that's what normal people do when the ground isn't opening. At the edge of the field, I found a crumpled piece of paper half buried in dirt. I smoothed it against my thigh. It was a site sketch, rough but legible, showing the path of the Skyline connector. A line ran straight across my farm, then curved toward the creek behind Mrs. Delgado's house, then further, past the subdivision, toward the old industrial lots off County 17. There was a stamp on the bottom, Blake Structural, no county seal, no signatures, just a phone number. I took a photo. Then I dialed. A man answered on the second ring, voice low, wary. Blake. Mr. Blake, I said. My name is Mark Anderson. I think your client is building something they don't have permission to build. On my land. Silence. A breath. Then meet me where the gravel road meets the creek. No cameras. After dark. The line went dead. I stood alone in my field, the paper soft and gritty in my hand, and for the first time since this started I felt something new slip under the anger. It felt like a door cracking open. When Ethan Blake told me to meet him at the creek, I expected a cautious handshake, maybe a manila envelope. What I didn't expect was to walk into the middle of a construction invasion that looked more like a military operation than a neighborhood project. The gravel crunched under my boots as I made my way down the dark lane. The moon hung low, its light swallowed by the flood lamps scattered across my land. They weren't supposed to be there that night. After the midnight fiasco, I thought they'd at least wait until daylight to sneak in again. But apparently when you're stealing land, sleep is optional. I crouched near the tree line and watched. A convoy of flatbed trucks was lined up like an iron snake. Massive steel beams glistened in the artificial light cranes swung overhead, and men in hard hats shouted commands over the roar of generators. My stomach dropped. They weren't testing. They weren't poking holes. They were building. And at the center of it all, like a general surveying her battlefield, stood Arya Moore. Pink blazer, even in the dead of night, clipboard in hand, barking orders into a walkie-talkie as if she were orchestrating a Broadway play. My farm was the stage, and I was the uninvited audience. You don't need permits if you call it progress, I muttered to myself. My voice sounded bitter even in my own ears. I heard footsteps behind me and spun around. Ethan Blake emerged from the shadows, tall and wiry, his safety vest hidden under a denim jacket. He looked more like a man sneaking out of trouble than one leading a project. You brought me into the lion's den, I whispered. He gave a humorless chuckle. Figured you needed to see it with your own eyes. They're accelerating the schedule. Arya wants a section standing before the county catches on. Before the county catches on, she doesn't even have approval. Exactly, he said, pulling a rolled-up set of blueprints from under his jacket. This is what they're building, and it's a disaster waiting to happen. We knelt in the dirt, unfurling the paper between us. The schematics were rough corners missing, but even my untrained eye could spot the shortcuts. Shallow foundations, cheap alloys, load calculations that screamed collapse. If they finish this, Ethan said, it won't just ruin your land. One strong storm, one overloaded train, and this thing comes down. I stared at the beams looming in the distance. And you still work for them. I was hired, he said bitterly. But they've cut corners on my paychecks just like on their steel. I'm done. I'll testify if you can protect my family. Arya, she doesn't play clean. Before I could respond, a shout cut through the night. Hey! Flashlights swung toward us. Ethan shoved the blueprints back into my hands. Run, he hissed. We bolted through the trees, branches whipping at our faces, the sound of boots pounding behind us. My heart hammered louder than the machinery. For a moment, I thought we were clear until a beam of light caught my shoulder. Stop trespassers. The absurdity almost made me laugh. Trespassers on my own land. We reached the creek splashing through the water and didn't stop until the lights faded behind us. I bent over, gasping, clutching the blueprints like they were the Holy Grail. Ethan's face glistened with sweat. That, he panted, is why you need to move fast. Back at the farmhouse, I spread the documents across the kitchen table. Rachel, my lawyer, came by after my frantic call. She adjusted her glasses, scanning the pages like a surgeon over an X-ray. "This is gold," she said finally, "and also terrifying." "You can win with this?" I asked. She looked at me, her eyes sharp. "We don't just win, Mark. We bury them. But it won't be easy. Arya will throw everything at you before this sees daylight." She was right. The next morning I found another orange envelope taped to my door, notice of immediate lien. According to the HOA, I owed 3 months of unpaid fees, plus extraordinary assessment charges for disrupting community projects. The total $14,732. It was laughable. And also crushing. Arya was playing her favorite game, bleed them dry until they quit. She thought she could scare me into submission with paper threats. But this time I had my own paper blueprints that could sink her empire. I decided to give her a taste of her own medicine. That night I uploaded a blurry screenshot from the schematics with the caption, "HOA wants to build this on private property without approval. Would you trust it?" Within hours my post spread like wildfire. Neighbors who had shrugged before now flooded the comments. "Wait, what? No permits? This looks dangerous." Others still defended her. "Trust the HOA. They know best." But for the first time, doubt cracked the facade. Arya responded in classic fashion. She called an emergency HOA meeting the next evening. I showed up early, binder under my arm, Ethan waiting nervously in the car. The hall buzzed with chatter, folding chairs, scraping neighbors craning to see what fireworks were about to go off. Arya took the podium like a queen, addressing peasants. "There's been some misinformation circulating," she said sweetly. "Let me assure you, the Skyline Connector is fully approved and beneficial to everyone here." I stood. "Then, show us the permits." Gasps rippled through the room. Arya's smile stiffened. "Mr. Anderson, you're out of order." "I'll wait," I said, arms crossed. She launched into a tirade about unity, progress, community values. Classic distraction. But when I pulled out the blueprints and held them up, the room fell silent. "These," I said, "are your so-called approved plans. Signed by no one, stamped by nothing. Built with materials cheaper than a dollar store lawn chair. One storm, and this thing falls on our houses." Neighbors murmured, some rising to see the papers. Arya banged her gavel like she was presiding over a kingdom. "These documents are stolen property," she shouted. "Stolen," I said. "From my own land?" The room erupted. Some defended her, others sided with me, voices clashing like cymbals. Through the chaos, I caught her glare, sharp, venomous, promising retaliation. I walked out that night with more enemies than friends, but also with something priceless: doubt spreading through her ranks. For Arya Moore, doubt was poison. When I got home, a rock lay on my porch with a note tied to it: "Drop it or else." I sat in the dark kitchen staring at the note, the blueprint spread before me, Daisy mooing softly in the pasture like she knew something was wrong. Arya thought fear would break me, but fear mixed with anger is just fuel, and I was just getting started. The emergency meeting had ended in chaos, but that was only round one. Arya wasn't the type to lick her wounds quietly. By the time the weekend rolled around, she'd scheduled a special session of the HOA board, complete with catered finger sandwiches and a hired security guard who looked like he wrestled refrigerators for fun. I showed up anyway. Binder in hand, boots muddy from the field, the smell of my barn still clinging to me like armor. People turned their heads when I walked in. Some nodded sympathetically. Others avoided eye contact as if HOA trouble was contagious. At the front of the room, Arya sat with her board like a queen, flanked by courtiers. Pink blazer again, pearls again, hair sprayed into the shape of authority itself. She tapped her gavel 3 sharp knocks, and the room fell into uneasy silence. "Order," she declared. "We are here to address the disruptive actions of one homeowner, Mark Anderson." I laughed. Couldn't help it. "Funny," I said. "I thought we were here to talk about the elevated railway sprouting through my field like a steel weed." Snickers from the back. Arya's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Anderson, you will wait until you are recognized." "I've been recognized enough," I shot back. "Every time a crane parks on my property." Gasps fluttered through the crowd. The security guard shifted his stance, but Arya held up a manicured hand. She wanted this fight on her stage. "Let's be clear," she said, voice syrupy. "The board is acting in the best interests of the community. Progress requires vision. Progress requires sacrifice." And sometimes she let her eyes rest on me, that sacrifice is personal comfort. "Comfort," I barked. Lady, they dug 5 craters in my cornfield. My fence is rubble. My livestock is terrified. That's not comfort, that's theft with extra steps. Her smile froze into something sharper. Mr. Anderson has been spreading misinformation online. Unverified documents, stolen property. That's when she signaled to her vice president, a man named Greg Holt, slick hair, slicker tongue. He stood with a flourish, holding up color-printed screenshots of my social media posts. Here we see Mr. Anderson deliberately undermining the community by posting fabricated plans Greg intoned like he was addressing a jury. This damages property values, scares families, and I cut him off. Fabricated. That blueprint came straight from your engineer, Blake Structural. You know him, don't you? Or did you stiff him on payments too? A murmur rolled through the room. Someone whispered, I heard about that, and suddenly half a dozen neighbors leaned toward each other, buzzing like bees. Arya slammer her gaul. Olda? But the murmurs grew. People wanted answers, and for the first time they weren't buying the HOA's script. I took my chance. I pulled out a glossy 8x10 photo from my binder, one of the blueprints Ethan had given me enlarged and highlighted. I held it high. Look at this, I said. No county seal, no permits, just sloppy math and shortcuts. This isn't progress, it's a liability waiting to collapse on our homes. And Arya wants us to clap for it like trained seals. The room tilted in my favor. Neighbors craned their necks, whispering louder now. A man in a ball cap muttered, My house is right under that line. A mother hugged her child tighter. Arya's mask cracked. Her voice lost its sweetness. You don't understand the complexities of urban development, Mr. Anderson. You're a farmer. Leave this to professionals. That one stung, but not the way she thought. I leaned forward, voice calm, deliberate. My family has worked that soil for 3 generations. We understand stability. We understand foundations. You're trying to build castles in the air with monopoly money, and when it crashes down, you'll blame everyone but yourself. The silence that followed was electric. For one heartbeat, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd won them over completely. Then Arya played her card. She snapped her fingers, and the security guard lumbered forward with a manila folder. He handed it to her, and she pulled out a crisp stack of papers. These, she announced, are official violations committed by Mr. Anderson over the past year. She began reading them aloud one by one. Unauthorized barn extension, improper placement of farm equipment, grass height exceeding 6 inches, unapproved signage. The audience tittered. Someone laughed outright. Arya smiled like a cat. According to HOA bylaws, she continued these violations result in fines totaling $18,400. I felt the room shift. Sympathy evaporated, replaced with unease. Neighbors who had looked supportive now leaned away from me as if my debts were contagious too. That was her genius move, turn me from victim to delinquent in the eyes of the crowd. I swallowed hard. The numbers were fake, inflated, absurd, but numbers have a way of sounding real when they're read from a podium. 18,000. I repeated, my voice low. For a barn that was here before the HOA existed. For grass that feeds the cows you're scaring to death. For signs you tore out of my soil with your own machines. I looked around. Faces avoided mine. Even Mrs. Delgado, my one-time ally, stared down at her lap. Arya leaned in, savoring the kill. If you can't follow the rules, Mr. Anderson, perhaps you should consider selling your property to someone who can. That was it. The humiliation. The trap she'd set. In one move, she painted me as the outlaw, the troublemaker, the man drowning in fines. I could have exploded right then. I could have shouted until my voice broke. But instead I smiled. Because while Arya had her folder of violations, I still had the blueprint. And Ethan, and Rachel, and the county email sitting in my inbox confirming no permits had ever been filed. This wasn't the final act. This was just Arya's encore before the curtain really rose. I closed my binder, tucked it under my arm, and stood. You've made your point, I said evenly, and I've made mine. We'll see whose holds up better in court. The room went still. Arya's smirk faltered. The word court carried weight. I turned and walked out, boots echoing against the tile. The guard didn't block me. Greg Holt looked rattled. Behind me, whispers swelled again, but this time they weren't all against me. By the time I reached my truck, my phone buzzed with a message from Rachel County wants a meeting. Monday morning, bring everything. I sat there in the cab, breathing in the smell of dust and diesel, replaying Arya's smug little speech in my head. 18,000 in fake fines. A room full of neighbors who'd rather look at their shoes than face the truth. But court wasn't her stage. Court was mine. And I wasn't planning to play the clown. Monday morning came heavy, like a storm pressing down on my shoulders. I barely slept the night before. Every creak of the farmhouse, every rumble of a distant truck had me half awake thinking Arya's crew was back to sink another steel pillar into my land. Rachel met me outside the county planning office, coffee in one hand, briefcase in the other. She was younger than most lawyers. I'd met early 30s, sharp eyes, hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun. "Morning, Mark," she said. "Ready to rattle some cages." "Been ready since the first hole they dug," I muttered. Inside, we were led to a bland conference room. Fluorescent lights at table, two shiny chairs that squeaked when you shifted. 3 county officials sat waiting, all in various shades of beige suits. Mr. Whitaker, the man I'd spoken to on the phone, looked nervous already. Rachel got right to it. She laid out the binder I'd built: photographs, videos, damage receipts, copies of the CC and Rs, and most importantly, the blueprint Ethan had risked himself to hand over. "These," she said, pointing to the schematics, "are structural plans currently under construction on Mr. Anderson's private property. No permits filed, no environmental reviews, no county approval." Whitaker adjusted his glasses. "We didn't know this was happening." "Then what exactly is your office approving?" Rachel pressed. One of the other officials flipped through the pages, paling as he scanned. "This is bad," he muttered. "If they're building without oversight, they are." I cut in. "I watched them. I filmed them. They're faster than termites and twice as destructive." The room grew tense. Finally, Whitaker sighed. "We'll need to investigate. If you could provide sworn affidavits, witness statements—" "You'll have them," Rachel said. Walking out, I felt a flicker of hope, but Rachel tempered it quickly. "They'll move slow. Bureaucracies always do. Meanwhile, Arya will move fast. You need more than permits and complaints. You need a smoking gun." "I've got Ethan," I said. "Then protect him," she warned. "Because if he flips, you're standing alone." That night, Ethan came by the farmhouse. He looked worse than before, dark circles, a jitter in his hands. "They know," he whispered the second I opened the door. "Someone tipped them off. I've been talking to you." I let him in, poured him a glass of water. "What happened?" "2 guys in HOA jackets showed up at my site office this morning, said they needed my hard drive for auditing. When I asked for paperwork, they just smiled. My files are gone." My gut tightened. "Do you have backups?" He nodded shakily. "Encrypted copies. But if they realize I still have them, then we keep them safe," I said. I locked his flash drive in an old metal toolbox I kept in the barn, one with a padlock, so stubborn you needed both patience and profanity to open it. Sometimes old-fashioned security beats digital tricks. Ethan leaned forward. "Mark, you don't understand. That design isn't just sloppy, it's catastrophic. The support beams they ordered are rated for half the load they'll carry. The soil under your farm isn't stable enough for their foundation depth. When not, if that structure fails, it'll kill people." I stared at him. My anger at Arya sharpened into something darker. She wasn't just trespassing, she was gambling with lives. The next morning, another envelope waited at my gate. This one wasn't orange, it was stark white, official-looking. I tore it open and read, "HOA Board Resolution, Immediate Forfeiture of Voting Rights, Anderson Household." So now I wasn't just fined. I was stripped of my say in the community altogether. A dictator's trick: silence. The dissenter then called the silence agreement. I laughed out loud, the sound hollow across the empty fields. "Nice try, Arya," I said to the wind. "You just handed me Exhibit B, because Exhibit A, the blueprint, was already in safe hands." By midweek, whispers started trickling through town. Neighbors knocked on my door, some supportive, some scared. Mrs. Delgado, clutching her shawl, said in a low voice, "I heard Arya tell the garden club that you'll lose your farm, that they'll bankrupt you." "Let her try," I said. "Courts see through bullies eventually." But not everyone was brave. Another neighbor, Mr. Carter, cornered me at the feed store. "Why can't you just let it go, Mark? The railway will raise property values. We'll all benefit." "At the cost of safety," I shot back. "At the cost of my land." He looked away. "Progress doesn't ask permission." "Then progress better, get a subpoena," I muttered. That Friday, Rachel called. "The county's stalling. They're requesting more documentation, but I've filed an injunction to pause construction until the investigation finishes." "Will it work?" "Maybe for a week, maybe for a day. Depends on the judge. Meanwhile, Arya will fight back harder. Be ready." Be ready. Easier said than done. That evening, I came home to find spray paint on my barn door. "Sell out or get out." I stood there in the twilight, the red letters dripping like fresh blood. My fists clenched. They wanted me rattled. They wanted me to fold. Instead, I grabbed a brush and painted 3 words underneath, "Not for sale." Saturday brought another twist. Ethan texted me, "Meet at diner, urgent." I found him hunched in a corner booth sweating into his coffee. "They've got more than I realized," he said. "The contract between the HOA and the transport company, it's laced with kickbacks." $500,000 in consulting fees routed straight to Arya's personal account. My jaw dropped. "You're sure?" He slid me a thumb drive under the table. Proof. Bank transfers emails. Enough to burn her entire empire. I slipped it into my pocket, pulse racing. This was beyond a zoning fight. This was corruption, fraud, maybe even organized crime. "Why give this to me?" I asked. Ethan's eyes were haunted. "Because I'm done being their puppet. And if something happens to me, make sure the world sees it." I barely made it home before headlights swept across my driveway. A black SUV idled at the gate windows, tinted engine low and menacing. I stood on the porch, shotgun in hand, though I didn't lift it. The SUV stayed 5 long minutes before rolling away. Message received. But I had a message too, $5 million worth of damages waiting to be claimed in court, plus a scandal that would drown Arya in her own lies. I locked the drive with Ethan's files in the same toolbox as the blueprint. Then I sat at the kitchen table, the hum of the old fridge filling the silence, and realized something important. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was bigger than a farm, bigger than an HOA feud. This was about stopping a woman who thought she owned the town from turning it into her kingdom, and proving to everyone watching that one stubborn man could tear down her throne. The courthouse smelled like floor polish and nerves. I'd been in there before for jury duty for paying a ticket once, but never as the man half the county had come to see put up a fight against his own HOA. Reporters clustered outside, holding cameras like bayonets. Neighbors filed in behind me, some curious, some whispering, some hoping to see me humiliated. Rachel walked at my side heels, clicking sharp against the tile briefcase, clutched like a weapon. "Remember," she said under her breath, "we stick to facts. Let Arya's ego do the rest." Inside the courtroom hummed with tension. The HOA had rolled in a full legal team, 3 men in tailored suits and 1 woman with glasses perched low on her nose. Arya sat at the head of their table, pearls gleaming pink blazer, freshly pressed smile carved into her face like stone. She looked like she was already posing for her victory portrait. The judge, an older man named Harper, with a gravelly voice, called the session to order. "Case of Anderson v. Homeowners Association presided by this court. Counsel proceed." The HOA lawyers wasted no time. Their lead counsel, Mr. Dalton, strode forward like he owned the floor. "Your Honor, the defendant, Mr. Mark Anderson, has repeatedly obstructed a community-approved project designed to bring growth and prosperity. He circulated falsified documents, harassed board members, and endangered progress." Progress. That word again. They wielded it like a sword, hoping it would cut deeper than truth. Rachel stood next, calm and precise. "Your Honor, what Mr. Dalton calls progress is, in reality, an illegal construction project. The HOA had no authority to seize private farmland, no permits from the county, and no safety studies. We will show evidence of forged documents, financial corruption, and deliberate intimidation against my client." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Judge Harper banged his gavel. "Quiet. Counsel, call your first witness." The HOA paraded witnesses, first a couple of board members parroting rehearsed lines about community vision. Greg Holt, their slick vice president, testified that the board had followed all proper procedures. Rachel rose for cross-examination. "Mr. Holt, can you produce the county permit for this elevated railway?" He shifted in his chair. I don't have it with me." "Do you know if it exists?" His jaw tightened. "I trust the board's process." "That's not what I asked." Rachel leaned closer. "Yes or no, does a permit exist?" Greg's silence answered better than words. Then came Arya herself. She walked to the witness stand like it was a runway. She swore the oath, sat, and folded her hands. "Miss Moore Dalton began, please explain to the court the purpose of the Skyline Connector." She smiled sweetly at the jury. "To bring prosperity, safety, and convenience to our community. Elevated transport will reduce traffic, increase property values, and ensure a better future for our children." Rachel rose. "Miss Moore, is it true the Skyline Connector runs directly through Mr. Anderson's private property?" "It runs where it needs to," Arya said smoothly. "For the greater good." "Greater good," Rachel repeated, pacing slowly. "Do you consider forging signatures the greater good?" The room buzzed. Arya stiffened. "I don't know what you mean." Rachel held up a blown-up copy of the contract. "This signature, supposedly the county commissioner's, is a forgery. We have a notarized statement from the commissioner himself denying he ever signed. Would you like to explain how it ended up on your paperwork? Arya's smile faltered. Clerical error, she said quickly. Clerical error, Rachel echoed. A clerical error worth $500,000 in construction funds. Gasps erupted. The judge hammered his gavel again. I watched Arya squirm for the first time, pearls glinting under the lights like beads of sweat. Then it was my turn. I swore the oath and took the stand binder clutched in my lap. Rachel guided me gently. Mr. Anderson, can you tell the court what you saw on your property? I told it all: the midnight floodlights, the cranes, the cows scattering the holes drilled like wounds. I described the intimidation, the fines, the spray-painted threats. I kept my voice steady, but every word dripped with the weight of nights spent pacing the floor. Dalton pounced on Cross. Mr. Anderson, isn't it true you've had multiple HOA violations in the past? Grass height equipment placement? Violations created by their machines wrecking my property, I said evenly. They fined me for fences they broke. They call it law, I call it extortion. Objection, Dalton snapped. Overruled, Judge Harper said, almost bored. Dalton's face tightened. He switched tactics. Mr. Anderson, do you have a background in engineering? No. Then how can you claim this project is unsafe? I smiled. Because the engineer who built it told me so, and that was Ethan's cue. He walked in looking pale but determined. He swore in, sat, and opened a folder. Mr. Blake, Rachel began, please state your profession. Structural engineer. 15 years. And did you work on the Skyline connector? I was contracted by the HOA. Can you tell the court what you discovered? Ethan took a deep breath. The design is unsafe. Foundations too shallow, support beams underrated, soil conditions ignored. If completed, the structure risks collapse under routine load. Dalton leapt up. Speculation. Not speculation, Ethan said firmly. Math. Physics. Fact. Rachel slid another paper onto the evidence table. And Mr. Blake, can you explain these documents? He adjusted his glasses. These are financial records. Transfers from the transport company into accounts linked to Miss Moore. Kickbacks disguised as consulting fees. The gallery exploded with chatter. Even Judge Harper looked rattled. Order, he barked. Rachel turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't about progress. It's about profit. A dangerous, illegal structure built on stolen land to line the pockets of those in power. Arya lost her composure. She jumped to her feet shouting, "This is a smear campaign. Lies from a bitter farmer and a disgruntled employee." Sit down, Miss Moore, the judge warned. She didn't. She ranted, pearls rattling as her voice cracked. This community needs leadership. Without me, it's nothing. I am the law here. Enough, Judge Harper thundered, slamming his gavel so hard it echoed off the walls. This court will not tolerate outbursts. Miss Moore, you are out of line. The jury stared at her wide-eyed. In that moment, she didn't look like a leader. She looked like a tyrant, unmasked. Closing arguments sealed it. Dalton droned on about vision and progress, but his words felt hollow. Rachel's voice cut through like a blade. Mark Anderson isn't just fighting for his farm. He's fighting for the truth. If this project goes unchecked, it won't be progress. It will be a disaster waiting to happen. And the people responsible will already have cashed their checks. She let the words hang heavy and sharp. The judge called recess. The jury filed out, whispers trailing behind. I sat at the table binder empty, now heart pounding. Rachel placed a hand on my arm. We did our part. Now we wait. I looked across the room. Arya sat, rigid eyes blazing with hatred. For the first time, she wasn't smiling. For the first time, she looked afraid. And I knew win or lose, this war was burning her kingdom down. The jury was out for less than 3 hours, but it felt like 3 lifetimes. Rachel and I sat in the empty corridor outside the courtroom, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My boots tapped a nervous rhythm against the tile. Every time the door creaked, my heart leapt like it was trying to escape. You did great on the stand, Rachel said, though her voice was tight. The jury heard you. They saw through her act. I nodded, though I wasn't sure. Arya Moore had money, influence, and the arrogance of someone who believed the world bent to her will. People like that didn't just lose. The bailiff finally opened the doors. All rise. We filed back inside. The jury was seated, faces blank as stone. The judge looked at the foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? Yes, Your Honor. The foreman stood, paper trembling slightly in his hands. In the matter of Anderson versus the Homeowners Association, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Mark Anderson. My knees almost buckled. The words rang in my ears like church bells. The foreman continued, "We award damages in the amount of $5 million for unlawful trespass, property destruction, emotional distress, and punitive damages." Gasps exploded across the courtroom. Reporters scrambled to scribble notes. Neighbors murmured in disbelief, and I just stood frozen, the number echoing in my skull. 5 million. Not 5,000. Not even 500,000. 5 million. Rachel grinned, triumphant, but Arya looked like marble cracking. Her carefully constructed mask shattered. She lunged to her feet, pointing at me. "This is outrageous. He's a farmer, a nobody. He tricked you all with fake witnesses and lies." "Sit down, Miss Moore," Judge Harper thundered. But she didn't. She ranted, pearls rattling against her throat. "I built this community. I made it valuable. Without me, you're just dirt and fences." The gavel slammed down like thunder. "Miss Moore," another outburst, "and I'll hold you in contempt." Her lawyers tugged at her sleeves, whispering frantically, but she shook them off. She looked wild now, hair coming loose, lipstick smeared at the corners. She didn't look like a leader. She looked like what she really was, a tyrant, cornered. The judge finalized the order. HOA must dismantle the illegal structure, cease all construction, and pay damages within 90 days. The sheriff's deputies shifted, waiting for their cue. And then, like fate had a sense of humor, the double doors swung open. 2 men in dark suits entered, flashing badges. State investigators. The taller one spoke. "Your Honor, we have a warrant for the arrest of Arya Moore on charges of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement." The room detonated. Gasps, shouts. Reporters nearly fell over each other. Arya froze her mouth, opening and closing like a fish. "This is a mistake. You can't arrest me. I'm the president of the board." "You were the agent," said flatly, snapping cuffs onto her wrists. "Now you're under arrest." Neighbors who'd feared her for years whispered in shock. Some even clapped quietly as if afraid she'd still bite. Greg Holt, her vice president, turned pale and slipped toward the exit, but deputies blocked him. I just stood there, stunned. My enemy, my tormentor, was being hauled out of the courtroom in chains. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. Afterward, the reporters swarmed me outside the courthouse steps. Microphones shoved in my face, flashes blinding. "Mr. Anderson, how do you feel about the verdict? Do you think the HOA will pay? What will you do with $5 million? I raised my hands, trying to steady the chaos. This wasn't just about money. This was about standing up to abuse of power. If they can bulldoze my farm, they can bulldoze anyone's home. Today proved they can't get away with it. Rachel leaned in and whispered, "Perfect soundbite." The crowd roared as deputies escorted Arya into a black SUV. Cameras clicked like machine gun fire. For the first time in months, I breathed freely. Back home, the farm looked different. The rebar was still piled up, the holes still gaping, but they no longer felt like wounds. They felt like scars healing. Daisy the cow greeted me at the fence, and for once I didn't feel helpless looking at her. That night I sat on the porch with a glass of sweet tea, Rachel's words echoing in my head. "You need more than permits. You need a smoking gun." Well, I had found it, fired it, and watched it blow Arya's empire apart. Still, victory tasted strange. Neighbors stopped by, some offering congratulations, others offering excuses. "We didn't know how bad it was, Mark. We thought Arya was telling the truth." I nodded politely, but part of me remembered every sidelong glance every time they looked away while I fought alone. Mrs. Delgado, though, hugged me tight. "You saved us," she whispered. "All of us." Within weeks, construction halted. Trucks disappeared, machinery hauled off, the floodlights finally dark. The county ordered the holes filled, the land restored. Crews worked under court supervision to undo the damage. Watching them dismantle the pillars felt like watching a bully apologize in slow motion. The HOA board crumbled. Greg Holt resigned. Others followed, some under investigation. The HOA itself was stripped of authority, its charter dissolved by court order. For the first time in decades, the neighborhood was free. As for Arya, the last I heard, she was awaiting trial, her empire gone, her pink blazer traded for orange. Then came the check. $5 million written in ink, delivered by court order. I stared at it for a long time, the zeros blurring. Money can't buy back time, can't erase sleepless nights, can't unburn a barn door painted with threats. But it can rebuild. It can restore. I paid off every debt, repaired my fences, rebuilt my barn bigger and stronger. I invested in new equipment, hired help for the farm, and set aside a fund for neighbors who'd been wronged by HOA nonsense over the years. One night, sitting around a fire pit with a few of those neighbors, someone asked, "So what's next, Mark? You're rich now. You could retire." I smiled, poking at the fire. "Retire? I was born on this farm. I'll die on this farm. Money doesn't change that. But maybe now I can sleep knowing no one's going to roll a railway over me in the middle of the night. Laughter rippled easy and genuine, but I wasn't finished with my message. I took a walk one evening through the fields, fresh shoots rising where holes had once yawned. The sunset poured gold across the soil, and I thought of my father, my grandfather, the legacy they left me. I pulled out my phone and recorded a short message, just me standing in front of the field. They tried to build a railway through my farm. They said I was just one man against progress. But progress without permission isn't progress, it's theft. And today we proved no one is too small to fight back. I posted it online. Within days it spread. Messages poured in from strangers across the country, stories of their own HOAs, their own battles, their own bullies. I realized then this wasn't just my fight, it was everyone's. As the cicadas sang that night, I leaned back in my porch chair, tea glass, empty heart, finally steady. I'd gone to war with my HOA, stared down intimidation, humiliation, even threats. And I hadn't just survived, I'd won. $5 million richer, yes. But more than that, free. And freedom, I realized, was the sweetest harvest of all. The days after the verdict felt unreal. For months, my life had been consumed by noise construction crews tearing through my fields, late-night threats, endless meetings with lawyers, shouting matches at HOA gatherings. And suddenly silence. No engines, no floodlights, no Aria Moore with her smug pink blazer. Just the wind combing through my cornfields like it always had. The county wasted no time sending in contractors to dismantle what Aria had built. I stood at the edge of my property, arms folded, watching cranes lift away the same beams that had been planted like spears into my soil. It was strange, the sound of destruction felt almost musical when it was undoing someone else's mess. Daisy, the cow, ambled over, chewing lazily, as if to say, "Took you long enough, boss." I laughed for the first time in weeks, a full-bellied laugh that startled even me. Neighbors began stopping by, some out of guilt, some out of genuine relief. Mrs. Delgado brought a basket of tamales and hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. "You saved us all," she said again. Mr. Carter, the one who'd told me to let it go, shuffled his feet awkwardly on my porch. "Guess you were right," he admitted. "I just didn't think anyone could actually beat her." "That's the thing about bullies," I told him. "They look 10 feet tall until someone pushes back. Then you realize it's all smoke and mirrors." The $5 million check arrived by certified mail, crisp as a winter morning. Rachel came by to watch me open it, grinning like she'd won the lottery herself. "What's it feel like?" she asked. "Like I'm holding the world's most expensive apology," I said. But money was only part of it. Justice that was priceless. I put some of the money into fixing the farm, new fencing, fresh equipment, a proper irrigation system. I set aside a chunk for my kids' future, even though they'd sworn they had no interest in farming. "Doesn't matter," I told them. "It's yours, and it'll outlive me." Then I did something that made a few neighbors raise eyebrows. I started a fund. The Anderson Defense Fund, dedicated to helping homeowners in our county fight back against predatory HOAs. I figured if Aria could weaponize an HOA to build a railway, what was stopping another tyrant from paving over someone else's dream? The first family who came to us was a young couple fined for building a wheelchair ramp for their son. I wrote the check myself, smiling as I slid it across the table. That moment meant more than all the zeros in my bank account. Meanwhile, news of Aria's downfall spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed HOA president arrested for fraud, corruption scheme exposed, farmer wins $5 million battle against HOA tyranny. I never liked attention, but my phone rang nonstop with reporters wanting interviews. Some I took, some I ignored. My favorite was a young podcaster who simply asked, "What would you say to other people fighting HOAs right now?" I leaned into the mic and said, "Don't let them convince you their rules are bigger than the law. Covenants aren't crowns. If they're wrong, fight them, and fight louder than their bulldozers." The clip went viral. Suddenly, people from other states were emailing me their own horror stories. HOA presidents measuring grass with rulers, demanding homeowners repaint their houses because of clashing colors, even one that banned pickup trucks in driveways. I realized my little war had opened a door. I wasn't just Mark Anderson the farmer anymore. I was Mark Anderson, the man who proved an HOA could be beaten. One evening after the dust had settled, I sat on my porch with Rachel and Ethan. The sun dipped low, staining the sky orange and purple. Ethan looked better now, less haunted, though he still carried guilt for being part of the project. "You did the right thing," I told him. "Without you, they'd still be pouring concrete in my field." He shook his head. "Without you, I'd still be working for them. You gave me the push I needed." Rachel raised her glass of sweet tea. "To justice," she said. We clinked glasses. For a long moment, none of us spoke. We didn't need to. The quiet said enough. Months later, the field was whole again. Grass grew where rebar once stabbed the ground. Crops swayed in the breeze, unbroken, uninterrupted. Life had returned. I walked those rows one evening, letting my hands brush against the stalks, and thought of my father and grandfather. They'd fought storms, pests, droughts. But me, I'd fought something worse: arrogance dressed as authority. And I'd won. Standing in the middle of my farm, I looked toward the horizon and whispered, "We're still here." If you've followed me this far, you know this story wasn't just about a railway, or even $5 million. It was about standing up when everyone else told me to sit down. Arya Moore believed power made her untouchable. She thought a title, a gavel, and a pink blazer could bulldoze centuries of heritage and common sense. And for a while, she almost convinced the whole community she was right. But here's the truth. Power only lasts if people let it. Bullies thrive on silence. The moment someone stands up, the spell breaks. I won money, yes, but more importantly, I won freedom. Freedom to work my land without fear. Freedom for my neighbors to plant flowers without getting fined. Freedom for families to build wheelchair ramps, to live their lives without asking permission from a petty tyrant. And I learned something I'll carry forever. Courage doesn't mean you aren't scared. Courage means you show up anyway at midnight by the creek in the courtroom on the porch when the threats show up in red paint. So if you're out there dealing with your own HOA nightmare, hear me now, you're not powerless. Document everything. Find allies. Fight back. The law is bigger than their bylaws. And when you win, and you will, you won't just save your home. You'll save your dignity. Now tell me in the comments, if your HOA tried to steal your land, what would you do? And don't forget to subscribe, because this war may be over, but there are plenty more HOA stories to come.